Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Harikeśa Swami at the CC Bhagavadgita Swami's Divine Grace. Basic Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Charya's Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Praise to Gård Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Sri Radha Krishna Gopavana Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Mathura Dhama Ki Jai. Navadvip Dhama Ki Jai. Raghunath Swami Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glory some devotees. All glory some devotees. All glory some devotees. All glories, Shri Shri Guru Granth, all glories, Divine Grace to the Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavadgita as it is. Chapter 15, text number 7. Mamaivamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaho manakshastani indriyani prakristani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Purport. And this purport is very long, and I don't know if we will make it through. In this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatana. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva, and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion, and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms, like Lord Rama, Nrsingadev, Vishnumurti, and all the predominating deities in the Vaikuntha planets. The separate expansions, the living entities, are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead, are always present. Similarly, the separated expansions of living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of his qualities, of which independence is one. So, as usual, Srila Prabhupada is taking up the position of the preacher who is always considering how to defend the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because the Mayavadis, they think that the living entity is actually God, but he has simply forgotten it due to the influence of Maya. Actually, there is only oneness, the oneness of existence. Aham Brahmasmi, Sarvam Kal Vidam Brahma. Everything is Brahman. There is nothing but Brahman. Therefore, the living entities are also Brahman, and the Supreme is also Brahman, So things equal to the same thing are equal to each other. The living entities are Brahman. The living entities are the Supreme. They are God. But even though the Mayavadis use the Bhagavadgita as evidence of their ideas sometimes they do like that. They take the Bhagavad Gita as evidence of their ideas. This verse gives them a lot of trouble. Of course, a real Mayavadi wouldn't care much whatever Krishna says. He would just twist it. He would just take the Sanskrit and twist it until it says what he wants it to say. Thus, the Mayavadi philosopher is something like the material scientists who, in their proof or search for proof of the Darwinian theory, throw away all the bones that seem to have existed more than 200,000 years or something like that, or 30,000 years, that look like human bones. And thus, what they don't want to see, they don't see, and thus Darwin's theory remains prominent. Similarly, the Mayavadis, they take the verses which they like to see, and they throw out the verses that they don't like to see, or they twist the verses to mean exactly what they want it to mean. This is called dukreen karne, to twist and crack the syllables of the Sanskrit until it says what you want it to say. The Mayavadi scholars are very expert at this. They're very expert Sanskritists, and they're very proud of their Sanskrit knowledge. And they know how to twist the Sanskrit words in such a way that they say exactly what they wanted to say, that all is one, that all is one, that everything is Brahman, that I am Brahman, you are Brahman, that everything is Brahman, and so on. Now, the immediate answer to this question, or immediate answer to this theory of the Mayavadis, is very clearly given here. Therefore, Prabhupada starts off the purport by saying, in this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. And what is that identity? Mama eva amsha jivaloke jiva bhuta. The living entity is eternally the part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The specific word part is used there, amsha. It does not say the whole. And nowhere is it stated that the living entity is the whole, that the living entity is equal with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is not stated. What is exactly stated is amsha. You are a part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One must take the dictionary definition of the words, not the definition which is interpreted. An interpolation it is called. Amsha means part. You should take that exactly what it means. It does not say the living entity is the whole. It says the living entity is the part. And the part of what? Mama. My part, Krishna says. The living entity is my part and parcel. Now, of course, you can try to say that Krishna is just puffed up. He's just like us, the Mayavadis, who also claim that we are God. So Krishna is just another one claiming that he is God. But a problem arises inasmuch that if I am God, then you are God too. If I am God and you are my part and parcel, that means there's a difference between you and me. I'm the whole and you're the part. So only one person can say this in existence. Now, generally the Mayavadis, they do not say, I am God and you are my part. They never say that. They say, I am God, you are God, He is God, she is God, it is God, we're all God. It's all one. That's the only way that philosophy works. As soon as somebody says, I am God, but you are my part, the whole thing breaks apart. Because then we have the supreme and the subordinate. Now, if somebody else were to come along, let's say me, for instance. Let's say I wake up one morning in a completely demented state, and I come to the Bhagavatam class and I tell all of you, my dear devotees, now I've come to reveal the real truth, that I am the supreme and you are my parts and parcels. Of course, you'll throw me out the door and tell me to get lost. Now, I could do that. I have that freedom to do like that. You will not accept it, but I have that freedom. Those who are intelligent amongst you, you will say, all right, why don't you show us something to prove that you are God? I cannot show anything. I don't even know some magic. I can't even pull samosas out of my pockets. I can't do anything. I'm so useless. So you will immediately capture me as a rascal, because you will say, show your universal form, O Lord. And all I can show is my walking clothes when I wear my baseball cap and I go for a walk. That's the only other form I've got. I've got my dhoti and kirta, and then I've got my baseball cap and my shorts. Oh, sometimes I wear my sweatpants. So I may have 3 forms. So it is obvious to anybody who has a little brain that I am not God, because I cannot do anything special. I still have to go to the dentist and scream in agony when he drills my teeth. I still have to suffer pain. The material existence is still, I'm still very much attached to the material existence in this material body. I will grow old and I will die. None of these things are symptoms of God. Therefore, were anyone to proclaim that he is God, we would know perfectly well how to counter that argument. Now, someone may say, well, we could say the same thing about Krishna. Of course, that would be simply ignorance, because those who know Krishna know that he displayed all the symptoms of God. He could marry 16,108 wives and keep them all completely satisfied. Now, if that's not God, I don't know what is. I know how many people have problems keeping one wife satisfied. One little wife. She can drive the man crazy. And Krishna kept satisfied 16,108 wives, and he could have married 16 million wives and kept them all happy. That is God. How he lifted up Govardhan Hill. So many things we all know. We're devotees. We know the glories of the Supreme Lord. So we're not fooled. Therefore, it is an incontrovertible thing that the Supreme Personality of Godhead here is the one who is talking. And that was already stated, I think, in the 15th verse, not the 15th verse. The first verse of this chapter starts off with Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, 15.1. We're on 15.7 here. It was Sri Bhagavan who is saying these things. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is saying these things, not some ordinary man, not some ordinary Mayavadi. Therefore, the Mayavadis have many problems with these verses. And especially here, the word is used, Sanatana. Clearly, there is no doubt whatsoever what these words mean. We can ask Ekanath Das, our Sanskrit man, is there any doubt what these words mean? No, he says. Sanatana, it's eternal, part and parcel. It's clear. You don't have to argue about what these words mean. You are the eternal part and parcel of Krishna, who's speaking, Bhagavan, Mamayvamsho, Jiva Loke, all the living entities in this world of conditioned life. They are the eternal parts and parcels of the Lord. And here's another point which makes the difference between these living entities and the parts and parcels, which we'll get at a little later, is that the living entities are struggling. The Supreme Lord, he doesn't have to struggle, but the living entities, they have to struggle. That will come very soon in the purport. So let us understand there are two categories here. There is the possessor and the possessed. Krishna is the possessor of all the living entities because they all come from him. They all emanate from him. And we, the living entities, are the possessed. We are owned by Krishna. We are Krishna's parts and parcels. There is the Shramsa and the Vibhinamsha. The Shramsa refers to Krishna and his personal expansions, and the Vibhinamsha refers to the separated expansions. We are separated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead due to our mentality of wanting to lord it over the material world. Because we want to be the enjoyers and controllers, we are now separate from the Supreme Lord because we don't recognize him and his incarnations and expansions. Therefore, we are rascals number one, because we do not understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, those who are in this Krishna consciousness movement are extremely lucky, because here we are trying to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to understand that he is the source and we are the emanation. He is Purusha, we are Prakriti. Prakriti is actually a feminine word. It means the energy, both male and female in this material world, are Prakriti, the energy of the Supreme Lord. Compared to Krishna, we are all feminine, and he is the supreme masculine. He is the supreme, we are his parts and parcels. We all have our identities. Natu evaham jatu nasam natam neme janadipaha. Krishna stated in the Bhagavadgita, 2nd chapter, that never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. We are all eternal parts and parcels of the Supreme. All of us have our separate identities. No two individuals are exactly alike. Even in mathematics, this is a fact. In higher forms of mathematics, 1 does not equal 1. Because this 1 is over here, and that 1 is over there, and they are separated by an equal sign in between. The only time there can be perfect identity or unity is when that 1 and that 1 occupy the same place at the same time, which is not possible. Therefore, everything is unique. Everything is unique in this world. Just like when we write with a pen, 1 equals 1. What we are thinking is that 1 unit in the numerical system is equal to 1 unit. But that thing 1 which we've written is in no way equal to this other thing 1. First of all, it's impossible to write exactly the same. There'll always be a little squiggle here or there, or the paper will make a little bubble somewhere. It's not possible to make it perfect. It's just a representation of some mathematical concept. That's all. But in reality, there is no equality like that. Absolute equality. Therefore, although I am spirit soul, 1/10,000th tip of a hair in size, and you are spirit soul, 1/10,000th tip of a hair in size, because you are a different part and parcel than I am, we are never equal totally. We may be equal in quantity. We may be 1 in quantity. We're both 1/10,000th the size of a tip of a hair. But in quality, although we're Satchidananda Vigraha, I am a different Satchidananda Vigraha than you are. This is so nicely explained when we understand the gopis in Vrindavan. There are so many gopis. And yet they all have an individual characteristic and quality which separates them from the other gopis. And Krishna appreciates all that variety. He appreciates the one gopis of a fiery nature, one gopis of a cool nature. One gopi has this quality, one gopi has that quality. They're all different. They all look different. Although they're the most beautiful ladies in existence, they all are different. We are all different. Even you have twins who are so remarkably the same. There are differences. There's always differences, which marks one personality different from another personality. That is because there's infinite variety in the spiritual world. Infinite variety. There is no doubt that the spiritual world is of a greater quality and quantity than the material world. People think that if the material world has quality, the opposite of that, they conjecture, the spiritual world must be the opposite of the material world. That is false logic. Why should it be the opposite? It can also be a further expansion of the material world. Or actually, as it really is, the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Therefore, there's no need to have to say that the spiritual world is opposite the material world. That is simply mental speculation. There's no reason for that. It does not have to be like that at all. There are other models which can be taken. And in fact, this material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. That is explained previously in this 15th chapter with the example of the banyan tree with its roots upwards and its branches downwards. This tree is a perverted reflection. The material tree is a perverted reflection of the spiritual tree. So the actual existence is not understood by the materialists. They think that the living entity is somehow or another must be a negation of this material body. Therefore, they think he's nothing. Buddhists think like that. If I am something, then the spiritual nature or the absolute nature must be that I am nothing. But actually, I here am temporarily existing. Therefore, in the spiritual world, I'm eternally existing. That also works logically. And it makes much more sense. There are qualities here in the material world. The spiritual world has, here these qualities are infinitesimal, and there those qualities are infinite. Here those qualities are limited, therefore those qualities in the spiritual world are without limit. That is the difference between the material world and the spiritual world. And that makes much more sense too, because how can it make sense that the superior realm possesses less than the inferior realm? Everyone says this material world comes from the spiritual. But it doesn't make sense that something which has less information in it can generate something with more information in it. This is not allowed according to logic of mathematics. That's like saying, I don't have any apples, but I give you 5,000 apples. I don't have any, but somehow I give you 5,000. Where did they come from? They have to be created at one point. Or you can say they were always existing. But where were they before I gave them to you? If you say, Brahman is everything, everything comes from Brahman. Okay, here's a table. It came from a tree. Tree came from a seed. Where were those things in Brahman before they came here? They weren't. They didn't exist because Brahman has no form. Brahman has no personality. Brahman has no existence of any particular thing. And what would be the reason why Brahman would put it here? These are all simple arguments, but the Mayavadis have great trouble with these arguments because their philosophy does not make any sense. It is senseless. But the living entity, he is not senseless. He is sentient. He has his senses. And he has also his independence. We were just about to read in the purport about the independence of the living entity. Every living entity, as an individual soul, has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from his material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditioned life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and he forgets this transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. So, the living entity has his independence. I am independent. I may do what I like. Of course, the modes of material nature are pushing me. And therefore, sometimes I do something which even I don't like to do. But the modes have pushed me, and I do it anyway, just like in anger. When a person is angry, there is nothing that he cannot say and nothing he cannot do. One overwhelmed with wrath can even kill his father or guru or his wife or whatever, because he's overwhelmed by anger. He cannot control himself. The anger has come to him and has absorbed his whole body and mind, and he does terrible things. But the point at which you let the anger control you, you have the independence. Yes, I shall go with this, or no, I shall not. If one knows how to conquer anger, then he does it by forgiveness. This is a very important point. You can conquer anger by forgiveness. If you are angry at a person for what they have done to you, you can forgive them, and thus the anger will be abated. Otherwise, if you don't forgive, it will just get more and more and build up and cause you all kinds of troubles. In any case, we are independent and are able to think or able to act in ways which we choose. We choose the next body. We choose the next body by our present acts, and thus we accept these new bodies. So we are independent. However, if we falsely use that independence to turn away from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we are nonsenses number one. And if we do like that, then we have to struggle very hard with this material nature. And we can read on here where Prabhupada speaks about that struggle. That struggle, of course, is exactly the reason why we are not God. And every Mayavadi should understand this, because the Mayavadis are also struggling. God doesn't have to struggle. Anything and everything he wants at any moment in time, he can create. He doesn't even have to think about something to create it. By his desire alone, it is created. He doesn't have to worry about it in the slightest way. But for us, whenever we want something, we have to struggle. We have to work hard to earn money in order that something may come to us that we want. We have to struggle. And what are we struggling with? The six senses in the mind. Let's read on. The living entities, not only human beings and the cats and dogs, but even the greater controllers of the material world, Brahma, Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, and even Vishnu, are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word kaushati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. So, struggle. This world is a world of struggle, especially because of the senses. It is certainly proper to understand that the creation of the senses is a creation of passion, mode of passion in false ego. And that philosophical speculation and fruitive activities are predominantly born of the mode of passion. We also hear Kamesha Krodesha Rajaguna Samudbhavaha Mahashana Mahapatmam Sarvam Viram Dehinam, or something like that. That the living entity, controlled by passion, becomes controlled by lusty desires. And these lusty desires cause him to act sinfully, even against his will. Even he doesn't want to act sinfully. He is forced to act sinfully by the mode of passion, which later transforms into wrath, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy in this world. Therefore, passion, which is the creator of the senses in false ego, is to be avoided. One should at least bring himself up to the mode of goodness, whereby his mind and his senses will also be in goodness. That is not the goal, but it's a lot better than in passion and ignorance. The real goal is to bring the mind and senses to the transcendental platform, by which one may attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not that one shall remain always contaminated by the lower modes of material nature. One has to come up to the higher position. It is clear, however, in this verse that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body with the mind and the senses, and when he is liberated, this material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. We only struggle in the material world. You don't struggle in the spiritual world, because there is no material mind, material senses, and the 6 whips of material existence. The 6 whips of material existence which are driving us onwards are hunger and thirst, illusion and lamentation, and old age and death. These are the 6 whips which are keeping the living entity bound up hand and foot in this material world and fighting to overcome these things. We are fighting, struggling hard to overcome these things, and yet we fail again and again. Because why? We do not accept ourselves as servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We have to accept ourselves as servants of the Lord. Then we can easily transcend the modes of material nature and come to the level of Brahman. Mama chayo vyabacharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatichaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. By performing devotional service unto the lotus feet of the Lord constantly, one overcomes the lower modes of material nature and comes to the level of Brahman. If you want to be Brahman, you must act like Brahman. You cannot come to the level of Brahman and act like a materialist who is searching after satisfaction of his senses. That's not possible. To come to the platform of Brahman, you must act like Brahman, which means your senses must be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Otherwise, it is not possible to come to the platform of Brahman. Or even you do, by avoiding the devotional service of the Lord, you cannot remain there. Because of neglecting the lotus feet of the Lord, the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, one has to fall down again into this material world and keep the manifestations of illusion and lamentation and hunger and thirst and old age and death. So it is very important that one attain the spiritual body, which is freed from the influence of the struggle with the material senses, the 6 senses. Notice that the mind is included in the list of senses because it is the chief sense, the sense within. There are 10 senses, including the Gyanendriya and the Karmendriya. In this verse, we are speaking here about the Gyanendriya and the mind. The Gyanendriya refer to the eyes, the nose, the tongue, the ears, and the touch sensation. The agencies by which knowledge is acquired. And above them is the mind which controls them. Or actually, the senses control the mind in one whose senses are not controlled. And thus one is bewildered in material activities all the time. The following information is there in the Majjan Dinayana Shruti. Sava Esha Brahmanishta Idam Shariram Macham Atishvidya Brahma Bisampadya Brahmana Pashyati Brahmana Srinoti Brahmanai Vedam Sarvam Anubhavati. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body. And in his spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face. And he can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is. From Smriti also it is understood. Vasanti yatra purusha sarve vaikunta mortaya. In the spiritual planets, everyone lives in bodies featured like the Supreme Personalities of God, Supreme Personality of Godheads. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of Vishnu Murti. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yes, you can get a spiritual body. A lot of times people ask us, after we give introductory lectures in the science of Krishna consciousness, they ask us, what is the goal? What do you get at the end? And when we explain, you get a spiritual body, which is transcendentally equal to the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by which you can enjoy pastimes, seeing the Supreme Lord face to face, speaking with him, joking with him. Many of the friends of Krishna, like Madhu Mangala and others, they're always joking with the Lord, making fun, sometimes even at his expense. Sometimes his other intimate friends or the gopis, they would make sarcastic comments. Sometimes gopis like Lalita, they chastise Krishna very harshly for him causing so much pain to their beloved Srimati Radharani. So that proves without a doubt that the living entity attains a platform which is at least transcendentally equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The devotees in the spiritual sky are not even aware of the fact that all of this is emanating from the Supreme Lord, and therefore there's a world of difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entity. But because Krishna enjoys these equal or inferior positions, like to his mother and father, Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, he enjoys this inferior position. He enjoys carrying his father's slippers on his head. He enjoys being chased by Mother Yashoda with a stick in her hand. These pastimes give him pleasure. So the living entity in his spiritual body will enjoy unlimited pleasures with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, that is the platform we should attain. That platform by which we may become eternal associates of the Supreme Lord and perform pastimes and activities in the spiritual sky. Muktir hitvanyatarupam swarupena vayastati. There are activities after liberation. It is not that in liberation everything becomes void or one. There are activities after liberation. Liberation is only the beginning. The real stage of permanent activity in one's spiritual body, this is the real existence, the absolute existence. The words Mamai Vamsha, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. You cannot cut the soul. You cannot dry the soul. You cannot beat the soul. You cannot drown the soul. You cannot do anything to the soul. It is transcendental. It cannot be harmed. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word sanatan, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. Therefore, you cannot say that at one point in time, that fragmental portion was cut off of the whole. There was a whole, and somebody came along and chipped off a piece, and that piece became the part and parcel. It is not like that. It is that part and parcel is eternally a piece, eternally a part of the Supreme Lord. He is never chipped off of the Lord such that the Lord would become lessened by that. That the Lord becomes lessened when all these infinite living entities are chipped off of him. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts in this case. In this case, the Supreme Lord is the absolute. And although so many absolute and perfect units emanate from him, he always remains the complete balance. All these perfectly equipped units are always existing. And the living entities and the Lord are always relating individually as eternal servant and master. Therefore, you cannot misunderstand this Mamaivam word. Very important. The fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, Sanatana, eternally. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. Dehinosmin yatha dehe. That fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcels of gold are also gold. I'll quit there. Haribo.